viewers, wherever you're watching us from, welcome to our weekly State of Affairs program here on QTV, the Gambia's first private TV station, and we are broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue, just behind the QCMN building. I'm your host, Aliou Cisse. Well, this week my co-host, CDC is not here, but today, this week, we are looking at the roles of the different select committees at the National Assembly as the, a very important arm of the government in relation to what has been happening in the country recently, from the prices, hike of prices of basic commodities to, so many other issues that have been happening in this country. We will look into detail as to what is the role of the National Assembly in this whole thing. And joining me this week, I have Honorable Usman Silla, National Assembly member for Banjul North, who is also the chairperson of the Select Committee on Health. Honorable Silla, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Aliou, for having me on your program.
Okay. Also in the studio is Setmati Jau, political analyst, and who also doubles as the executive director of the Center for Policy for Research and Policy Development. Setmati, good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Aliou. Happy to be here.
Good. Honorable, I will start with you. Like I said earlier, we have different select committees at the National Assembly, but just give us a gist of what is the purpose of these select committees.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cisse. The National Assembly is one of the arms of the state, the three arms of the state that are responsible for managing the affairs of the country called the Gambia, and is prescribed in the Constitution. Its role clearly spelled out. Basically, the role is to be making laws, performing oversight on government institutions and processes, and also the members representing the constituents, both at the constituency and the national level, because when you say National Assembly, it's about the Gambia. But of course, Gambia is such that the representatives have to be elected, and that's the mechanism we've established. That is, constituencies in our countries is proportional representation, but in the Gambia it's a direct mandate, and the Gambia is divided into constituencies, and we have 53 constituencies that elect these National Assembly members. And of course, there are 5 who are nominated by the president. They all constitute the National Assembly. In our oversight responsibilities, we do that through committees. You have different types of committees. You have what we call standing committee, and those committees are prescribed by the Constitution. They are in the law, like Public Enterprises Committee, Public Finance and Accounts Committee, FPAC, and so on. And then you have select committees. They are not necessarily prescribed, spelled out in the Constitution, but they are committees that the National Assembly can constitute, because the National Assembly is given the mandate to establish committees as it sees fit to ensure, to enable it to execute its functions. So select committees, one of them is health, which, as you said, I'm chairing. Of course, it's combined not only health, but women, children, disaster, humanitarian relief, and refugees. You have others on tourism, you have others on youth, sports, and basically those are the select committees. You can also have special select committees that the National Assembly can constitute, and then it can also constitute joint committees. So it's a liberty to devise mechanisms as to how it represents the country. So basically, this is what we have at the National Assembly.
Yes, like you said, these are committees that are very important because they also have an oversight function over what some of these government institutions do. But in terms of the selection, how are they selected?
Well, as for the standing committee, it is the National Assembly authority. Once the National Assembly is constituted, that is after elections, immediately after elections, it is constituted. The authority is identified, and our experience was that the majority and minority leaders are part of the authority, and of course there is gender. A female was also included in it, the speaker. So these are the ones, and someone representing the independents. So these are the ones who constitute the Assembly authority. So, and of course the clerk, and these are the ones that decided on who should serve in these committees, of course. And then according to them, they considered certain factors like representation, balance in gender, and so on and so forth. And then of course for the select committees, I think there were quite a few, 1 or 2 that were selected by them. But for health, it was left open. They allowed members Of course, 12 members were identified to serve in that committee, and it was the membership that decided on who to elect to serve as chair, to serve as vice chair. And then, of course, we do have rapporteurs. Yes, rapporteurs, well, their role is amorphous as far as we're concerned, because they don't normally take notes. We have committee clerks that do that. But the name is there, rapporteurs. I've not seen any role they play, apart from their active role, the active role that they play in the work of the committees. But as for rapporteur writing, no, they don't report. They don't take notes. They don't prepare reports. So I think it's something that the National Assembly can revisit to either change in the nomenclature and then just allow chair, vice chair, and then secretaries who are members of the National Assembly Service Committee. But as we said, the role of committees are to perform oversight, and then on sectors that are under their purviews, like for instance, health is a sector, women is a sector, and subsectors as well. So they are assigned to these select committees, standing committees, like standing committee, we have oversight, foreign affairs standing committee.
Excellent.
Yes, so they have issues under their purview that they perform oversight on.
But in terms of what's been happening in the country, for example, I mean, people are complaining about the recent hike in price of basic commodities. I mean, what powers does the select committee, for example, trade and other areas? What powers do they have in terms of addressing some of these challenges?
Well, as you know, as National Assembly members, in terms of price hikes, in terms of basic commodities or consumer goods that are of concern in terms of prices to the population, the National Assembly, because we have that representative responsibility as well, both oversight and responsibility, and even legislation. But as you know, Gambia, they claim to be a liberal economy, so price control is a no-go area. They are not do that because of what they claim to be. And of course, the constituents are complaining about price hikes. We are all living through it nowadays. There is a committee on trade, which I'm also a member of. Consumer organizations can petition, can write committees, particularly this committee, to make representation, to talk about these issues. Bakers Association, drivers, they can all approach the National Assembly in terms of its oversight and representative roles to look into these issues. But I think in terms of governance, people also ought to understand that there are responsibilities. In terms of execution, in terms of implementation, it's the executive that does that. That is the president and the ministers and the ministries, the departments, they call it MDAs, ministries, departments and agencies of government. They are the ones that that implement laws, that implement policies. But we perform oversight to ensure that laws are implemented and policies are implemented. And of course, when it comes to the lives and livelihoods of the people, it's our concern. So, but you can see, let me just give you an example. When we came in 2017, the then Minister of Finance, the first Minister of Finance, did come to the National Assembly to convince us to lift taxation on rice importation. But I think the day it was lifted, that was the day prices started to hike, literally. Exactly. And since then, it is run away. It is going up on control. But what was the point? People are asking. So you can see. But I think, well, when you're brief,
I will come back to you on these issues.
I can elaborate on that more. Yeah.
Having heard from the Honorable National Assembly member, do you think these committees are really doing what is expected of them in relation to the realities that we are seeing happening?
I mean, like he said, I mean, committees are expected to provide an oversight to projects that have been implemented or governance. Just yesterday, I was on the National Assembly website, and I have seen almost several reports that have been produced by the committees on specific issues. And I think that shows basically that the committee has been doing their work. And of course, their job is not to implement, is to, like he said, I mean, listen to the people in terms of representation, but also to advise government on even the ministries in terms of what the people are saying, and even discuss areas and mechanisms through which those issues could be addressed. And of course, definitely I have seen several reports that have been produced by the various committees of the National Assembly. Yeah,
but it's one thing to have these reports produced and published on their website, but in terms of implementation, I mean, they have an oversight function. They can push for the implementation of some of these some of their recommendations.
Yeah, that's why I always saying that, I mean, you know, their job is to say, well, of course, this is not working this way. This is the way it's supposed to work. This is what the people are saying. But there is somebody that is also designated, that is given that responsibility to also do that. And if somebody that is supposed to implement according to the way people want it is not doing that, I mean, that's the person that we should hold accountable.
And Honorable, is this in any way affecting the work of the committees?
Well, as he has rightly said, we do have reports. Lots of reports are out there, being prepared by committees as a result of their engagements with the sectors, and that what is left is implementation. That's our challenge also. Implementation is a challenge in this country. National Assembly can advise, but they can also assert. They can ensure implementation. We can do that. Like, for instance, a case in point is today. We had a very interesting incident at the National Assembly for the first time. The Minister of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice was supposed to come before the National Assembly last week. He failed, and then the National Assembly sanctioned him. And there were options. We could have resorted to Shenso, that is removal of the minister. The National Assembly could have recommended for his removal. We have that power. The National Assembly could have also charged him for, or whoever is the minister, contempt. And then we can also ask the minister to apologize, and that is what we have done. The lesser of the punishments, the various punishments, that is for the minister to come before us to apologize. And he came and then said that it was inadvertent, it was not deliberate, his absence was not deliberate, which we also took for me in good faith. For me, I accepted it. It was not deliberate, it was inadvertent, according to the reasons he advanced. This is just to show you that the National Assembly has powers. We need to assert our powers at times. And then sometimes you can see, like I said, today we've done that. We asserted our authority. And it can happen in almost everything that is charged to our responsibility. We can ensure implementation. Are we doing that? Well, sometimes that's like you said, the executive can be held accountable. But the National Assembly can also be held accountable for not holding the executive accountable. Ultimately, for us, our boss, that they call boss, I don't use that word, but our boss is the people. But we are the bosses of the bosses. We are the boss of the bosses. National Assembly is the boss of the bosses. Sometimes they feel that it's the executive that is the boss, the president. Of course, he has his responsibility, but the boss of the president is the National Assembly. So we can ensure implementation. This I can tell you, yes, definitely.
But I mean, like you said, you can ensure that that things are implemented. But for Segmati, let's now come back to you, not just as a political analyst, but as an ordinary Gambian, looking at what is happening currently in terms of land. I'm very much concerned about this, the increase in the prices of basic commodities. I mean, it's quite worrying. I mean, do you think who should be blamed in this area, the National Assembly or the executive?
I mean, I think for me, I mean, given that, I mean, Honorable also mentioned the assertive role that the National Assembly can play, then we can say that perhaps what we are experiencing is malgovernance, in the sense that, our governance system is not working accordingly. Because the other day I heard the Minister of Trade was, at the National Assembly, was talking about the fact that, importing goods through Dakar is an added advantage to the country, while acknowledging for the fact that our port is still problematic. Of course, I mean, so these are the issues that we must be dealing with, and I think clearly now, I'm not sure exactly why also, of course, the COVID-19 has been blamed for the hike in prices. And even I heard government talking about the fact that it's not only Gambia that is experiencing it, but it is us that is feeling it. And, we don't know what the other person is feeling. And so right now we're in Gambia, so we're talking about these issues within this country. And so for me, I think it is more a problem of governance and problem of not looking at the needs of the people, or even redirecting the policy of government. Particularly look at rice, for instance. We keep importing. I mean, why not we reinvest money in agriculture, in other places, and start producing locally? So those are the issues sometimes, I mean, that we need to bring on the table, but more or less I will blame it on the problems of governance.
And like you said, you're talking about issue of the trade minister, and I will just quote what he said according to the Standard newspaper. He said, we believe using the port of Dakar, which has lower charges and is more efficient in handling, will definitely put a plus, and where it not for that, you will have expected higher prices because congestion and demurrage at the port of Banjul far exceed the one in Dakar. Is this justifiable for the increase in price?
Well, let me just say that we have an intrinsic problem, and unless that is resolved, that is addressed, we can never cope prices, particularly the hikes in prices of basic commodities, unless Gambia starts producing what it consumes, and Gambia being a liberal market, as they call it, we can never escape price hikes. We as a government, we as a country, must invest in the productive base of our economy. We must be producing. Let us invest in agriculture, and it is not rocket science. The resources are here. The expertise is here. Nature is here. It's just a question of harnessing it. That is what is left. Unless that is done, we cannot control prices, because you are importing. The person who the one who's doing business is not doing charity. He's doing business, and then he wants profits. That's why I gave you that example when we started. That in 2017, the first finance minister came to the assembly and pleaded with us that we should lift the taxation on rice importation. But once that was done, prices were not stabilized. They were not going down. They were going up. There was zero taxation on rice importation. So what is not attracting any tax is cannot be controlled. It's run away. You know, it cannot be controlled. Much more the communities that are being taxed. So this is the reality. We must really refocus, redirect our energies, redirect our resources in the productive base of our economy, particularly in agriculture, value addition, food processing. These are the things that the country needs. Once this is done, definitely we can, in fact, the prices will be controlled naturally, because you would have them. Once there is abundance, price naturally goes down. Yeah,
but even in that case, I mean, the parliament is responsible for approving most of these multi-million-dollar loans that comes to agriculture sector. But what is done after these projects have been approved, these fundings have been approved by the National Assembly?
No, like I said, it's also good to understand governance. That is the executive, as I was telling you. It's the government that enters into agreement. It's the government that takes loans. And government and National Assembly, they're different. We are not the government.
Exactly.
I'm not part of the government. We are not part of the government. We are part of the legislature, which is state arm. Government is another state arm. It's the government, according to the constitution, that takes loans. It's the government that comes and proposes that these are the resources that we have. This is where we want to get them from, and this is where we want to spend it. It is us that approves. Of course, we are the ones that approve. But we cannot change that. Like, let me give an example. The government says, we have $100. And we said, no, make it $200. We don't have that power. There's also a limit to our authority, to our powers.
But you have the powers to, to supervise, to know how these projects are implemented.
Certainly, no, of course. When it comes to, of course, when it comes to, that's oversight. That's the role of oversight. What I'm saying, that's the role of oversight. That, of course, we are the ones after approving loans to ensure that the resources go to where they go to. But, there's also this intrinsic problem with projects. If you look at the projects, most of the projects, their portfolios, you see what goes to the beneficiary is so minuscule. It's very small. Majority goes to operations. You go and contract $100 loan. That $100, if you look at it, only $50, like for instance for farmers to improve agriculture. If you look at it, you will see at the end of the day, nothing more than 20% goes directly to the beneficiaries. All the others are on operation. So in fact, we need to also revisit this type of project implementation, project design. That when we come in for projects, let the majority go to the beneficiary. Majority of what is being taken as a loan or what as a grant must go to the beneficiaries. So there's also a challenge in this country. But of course, I agree that there is the oversight committees that should ensure. Well, we have a project monitoring committee there. We have a committee on agriculture, a project on health. These are the committees that should ensure that what is being budgeted first from the taxpayers' money, consolidated fund, like they call it Gambia local fund, GLF. Even the loans, the grants, we must ensure that they go to where they are intended to go to. It is our role as a National Assembly. And if we fail in that, it's our responsibility. We should take the blame, and not the executive.
Semati, you talk to many people that will tell you, okay, this is a global problem, the issue of price hike. I mean, since the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, we understand at some point, even the GRA did cut off, the taxes paid by some of these importers by 20%, which they call cost insurance and freight charges on these importers. But what do you think the Gambia should do now to ensure our port is as efficient as the port of Dakar, judging by what the minister has said at the National Assembly?
I mean, for me, the minister's statement was very disappointing. I mean,
Oh, really?
as a whole country, you're kind of marketing another country instead of, you know, focusing on fixing the problems that are wrong within your own country. It seems like they have given up. And if they've given up, and it's their responsibility, and you are talking about trade minister who's supposed to ensure that the environment is conducive so that there could be more business. If the liberal idea is like we can import more so that prices could be cheaper, I think they need to start working on that. For me, is that people are not doing the job that they're supposed to do. That's why we're getting into this problem. If people start doing their job, I mean, I think at the end of the day, nobody will tell us that it is cheaper, like we should thank God because it is cheaper. I mean, we have a country. It is a country that we have, and it is a country that we must build. If the leadership is telling us that, I mean, we need to thank God because there is a second route, I mean, for me, that's the problem, and that problem needs to change.
Who will take the lead?
I mean, we're given already. You want me to mention names? They've been given responsibility. I mean, that's for me. First is the executive, is the government, because they are responsible for that. And then secondly, then we can come to Parliament, especially when it comes to you know, looking at the infrastructure or what kind of resources are needed to you know, to expand the port. But again, like, I mean, as a young person growing up in this country and hearing that Gambia used to be, I mean, like, we used to make a lot of money out of re-export trade, and today we're talking about, I mean, you know, congestion. I mean, in a port where, like, we have 80-kilometer coastline where we could really develop our transport system, particularly when it comes to the seaport. But we are missing you know, what is happening globally, and I think this is why a lot of people are suffering in this country today. I mean, we are not using our full potential, and we have people that do not want to do the work, basically.
Honorable, were you also disappointed by the statement attributed to the minister?
Well, I did not hear it, but of course, as we know, all the investments that are done with the ports, in the port expansion, relocation of, you know, settlements, where there was the social security people who are staying together, supporting one another, and you come and relocate them, just like that, you know, it has an impact. The investments made in the port expansion had an impact on lives and livelihoods. Only for us to be told that now what was being expected, the reason why they were doing all that expansion, all that relocation, all the negative consequences it might have had on the people who are settling there, and even the Gambia in general. Now we are not using it for that purpose. Like, now vessels are being encouraged to deck elsewhere. And of course, it's very disappointing. But as I said, I did not hear it from the minister. I don't know.
Were you not in Parliament?
No, I was not in Parliament.
Okay.
I was not in Parliament
right.
when he said that. But of course, I'm not disputing it. That definitely we should not be, as he said, promoting another country at the expense of the investments we have made, because we've made investment. A lot of investments have been made in the ports, particularly the port expansion. I'm telling you about the relocation. But then, are we developing our ports to be importing goods, or we are developing our ports to be exporting? I think we need to focus on developing our productive base so that the ports will be used more for exportation of what is produced here than importing. Of course, we need imported products because Gambia cannot produce all that it needs. We cannot, even if like, because for me that's what I'm promoting. But the basic food, I mean the basic things, basic commodities. But there are other things that we cannot be producing. Others have to produce, and then we buy from them. So we need a port. We need a port with state-of-the-art equipment, a port that is attractive, a port that is competitive. We need that, and we believe that that was the reason why they were engaged in the port expansion project. Yeah. Only to be told now that it is cheaper for Gambia, it is easier for Gambia, it is better for Gambia for the vessels to be docking at Senegal. Of course, it's very disappointing, and the executive really needs to address that, because that is not what is expected.
Perhaps his stand suggests that if not for Senegal, then the prices of basic commodities will have been worsened.
I mean, the prices are crazy already. I mean, what is I don't even see this difference. No. Because what used to cost, I mean, a few dollars before, now are costing very high. People now are finding it hard to afford even rice. Bread was $7 to $10. Fuel is increasing almost every day. I mean, at what point should people say that it is enough, for instance? I mean, and then would that make government to start, I mean, doing what? I think these are issues that people are talking about, and we need to see concrete actions that are kind of taken. Well, if the issue now, I agree totally that we need to start looking inward, and that involves, I mean, producing locally. I mean, every day we're on the radio, we talk to people talking about the fact that, I mean, it is only resources that they need. They will do the production, and yet we do not want to invest. Or when we're investing, you know, like he was explaining with the grants and loans, only few goes to the farmers, and then the rest of it goes to operational costs. In fact, even the way government is kind of budgeted, it is more budgeted for few people to enjoy rather than the rest of society to enjoy in terms of the operational expenses and all those things. So those are the issues that we need to, need to rethink. We need to rethink about our development, and for me, I mean, at the center of it must be the people. How much are the people, the citizens, getting back? And citizens are not asking for, everything. They're saying just create the environment. But right now, if the port is not working, I mean, currently what we are doing is importing and then making things cheaper. But if that is not working, then how do they expect the people to live?
I mean, earlier on, you talk about there is no price control. In your opinion, what do you think should be done? Because definitely we need a price control.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Will that also have another negative impact on the society?
Well, I'm not sure exactly in terms of, I mean, what needs to be controlled, whether even price control will address the issue. I mean, but for me, I think where I will agree is that we need to start producing things locally. But of course, again, some people will tell you that things that are produced locally here tends to be more expensive than things that are imported as well, because what is imported perhaps is imported in mass quantity compared to what is produced locally.
But
so for me,
even aside from that, how much do we believe in what is produced locally?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, for me, the way to control price perhaps have to do with subsidizing, I mean, certain issues. But again, I mean, even that is problematic
we
because
have
no tax with rice.
Tax on rice
and still, I really don't understand. I really don't understand that.
Honorable?
It's mind-boggling. Yes. Anyway, yes. What we really need, I think, we must not avoid this issue. That we must really plow back into the productive sector. As he was saying, if you look at the budget, national budget, they are in two. You have recurrent and development. Recurrent takes nearly 90% of the resources of this country, and that's the operations. What goes for development? Things that are tangible, things that go and benefit the communities directly. Is in that's on the low side. So as a country, we really need to refocus our approach. Everything should be people-centered, people-driven, and government needs to trigger that. Government should not be sitting down waiting for others to come on. Let government take the lead. Anybody who comes, he's talking about prices. Of course, they said if we have to rely on Gambian produce or Gambian products, it is more expensive because it's in small quantity. Mm. If we invest to make it in bigger quantities, it will be cheap. As I said, if anything that is in abundance, it tends to be cheap in terms of prices. So it's just a question of investing in them. Like for instance, rice, the rice that is produced here, there is tonnage. Gambia spends nearly $4 billion to import rice here. Even 1 billion of that amount, if it is invested, Gambia could be self-sufficient in rice.
Rightfully invested.
Rightfully invested, yes. I mean, we have the land, the water resources are here, we have the manpower. It's just organizing and channeling those resources to the proper place. Less on operations, more on what really generates production. Mechanization, seeds, good seeds, and then attractive prices for those that are involved in it, the farmers themselves. They will be producing, and then in fact it's good for our health. Yeah. The rice that you produce, the paddy that we produce here, is far more better than the polished rice that we import. Some of this rice that we are consuming might have been in the stores for the past 10 years. They're just coming now to the Gambia. But here you're just producing, and then you can eat from the farm to the plate. From the farm to the plate. We can do that. We just need to refocus. And the resources are here, I said. Last year, in 2020, government had to spend $800 million because of the
COVID-19.
Just to relief.
The COVID relief, yeah.
COVID relief.
Yeah.
It was good. I'm not objecting to it. But the fact that government can do that, government can also take out and that amount. Imagine 800 million investing it in agriculture, in rice production. I think, I don't know, I don't have the statistics, but I would believe that that amount can really cater for nearly half of the rice that we consume here. I mean, if it is invested locally. I'm not talking about the imported rice, but and it's cheaper investing here, producing than importing.
And when you talk about that, mind goes to Jahali Pachar, Mr. Mati. Yeah. I mean, it seems that place is not being.
Yeah, I mean, like half of the river Gambia is freshwater. I mean, from, you know, I don't know where exactly it starts, but all the way.
So Mati, we will just go for a short break, and then when we come back, then we will go into the issue of Jahali Pachar. Well, viewers, you're still watching State of Affairs, your flagship political program here on QTV. I'm your host, Aliou Cissé, and our guest this week, Honorable Usman Silla of Banjul Naf, who also doubles as the chairperson of the National Assembly Committee on Health, and Sheikh Mati Jaw, political analyst and executive director of the Center for Research and Policy Development. We'll go for a short break, and we'll be back soon.
Looking for the fastest and easiest way to receive money transfers from abroad? Well, QMoney and RIA just made it happen. Now you can receive international money transfer from RIA directly into your QMoney account with no additional cost. Once you receive an SMS alert about your transfer, walk into any QMoney agent across the country to receive your payment for free, or use the money immediately to buy credit, QPower, and other QMoney services. It's fast, safe, and convenient. For more info, call customer care on 133. QMoney, Sunu Kalpe. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello viewers, welcome back from that short break. You're watching State of Affairs. I'm Aliou Cissé, and said matter, just before we go on the break, we were talking about the issue of Jahali Pachar, which according to many, has the capacity to feed the whole country.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like half of this country, half of the river is freshwater, and I mean, and this has been tested as very essential for rice production. And Jahali Pachar, historically, we've been, since we were kids, we've been hearing Jahali Pachar. I think at some point even we were singing about that being the breadbasket of the country. But of course today we are not seeing much. I mean, but recently I've also seen that there's element of trying to revive it by private individuals, and that has kind of been very interesting for me because I think the potentials of that place, but more so along the riverbank there, have not been well utilized, and of course we can diversify that area, produce rice, even cotton that we used to produce before, but that one in Basse, I mean, we are no longer producing. And when I was growing up, we used to produce beni. Yeah. I mean, so many things that we're not. It seems like we're just deciding to leave agriculture behind and thinking that we can, survive on handouts or things that we can import. And this is also affecting to a large extent the way now it seems like we're mostly dependent on remittances that are coming as our main source of income instead of agriculture. So Jahali Pachar and most of the other agricultural projects like Jinoy, where they used to have mixed farming, all these things you see in the books, things that have been functioning. And even recently, if you go and then talk to farmers, these are also issues that they want to bring about. But all these things are like dead. They are dead. And
what I find so interesting is that, I mean, most of these issues, when they happen, government only react. And once it is sorted out, at that point they are done with it. I remember when we had that bread shortage in country, instantly they started negotiating with the bakers. And now that it is settled, I don't know what they are doing behind the scene to ensure that this thing doesn't repeat itself. But it's been happening, Honorable.
Well, I think these are issues that
we need to come with concrete solutions, long-term solutions, as far as these issues are concerned.
Certainly, it's a sector that needs to be organized and then supported. Like, for instance, in the marketing of bread, pastry. This is an area that government can really invest, where young people can, really find employment. Get the organized bread canteens, pastry canteens within the communities. This can be done, and the maize that we produce, the sorghum, the millet that we produce, this can all be transformed into flour to baking bread. So I think, and the blueprint is there. People have been working on these areas. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's just a question of political will for government to really start committing the resources on what they say, put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Huh? put the resources of the taxpayer by supporting them to be engaged in production and then marketing. Bread, as you said, is an area that, I think that the sector needs regulation, but it also needs organization. They need to organize the sector and to regulate it. And then to also diversify, not only relying on flour, this wheat flour. They can, like I said, the millet, we can exploit. And they've started. If you go to some of these bakeries, there are people are developing liking to those varieties, other than the normal bread that we used to, consume here. Besides that, it's good for diabetics, good for those who have hypertensive, although hypertension has nothing to do with, but diabetics. And of course, diabetics can lead to hypertension, as I understand from medical. So it's a question of just revisiting our approaches towards development. That's what the country needs. And the government committing resources to where it should go.
Well, that's the National Assembly member for Banjul, Naf Usman Sila, invest resources where it is needed for the development of this country. Now let's move forward. I mean, we have seen also the local area councils have started appearing before the select committees at the National Assembly to give, to report, I mean, as far as, the activity and revenue is concerned. I will start with you, Seth Mati. In terms of accountability, how important is this, having the local council now appearing before the parliament as well?
Yeah,
it wasn't the case before, but now they are.
Yeah, I mean, is it that they are receiving money now? Because at some point, there was an issue. I mean, for me, I am pro decentralization. I mean, I'm always for the people, and then I think development must be local, and politics itself must go down to the grassroots, to the people, and that's why I feel that the local government are the engines to the development that we require. But over the years, I mean, they've been seen mostly from the political lens in terms of mobilizing and all that. And if they're coming, before the select committees, I think that is great. That also builds to these aspects of accountability, which is also required. But for me, I think the focus when it comes to the local government is that we need to start looking at how do we make them more autonomous, how do we make them more independent, so that they can raise monies and then invest that money right inside inside their communities. At some point, everything was centralized. I mean, even if the money has to go all the way up and then come down again, which is always problematic. So for me, I think, financial, administrative, and also more political autonomy is needed, especially to ensure that the people will start holding their own local government more accountable, because of course they are the ones that are closer to them, and they are the ones that should bring development to them. But otherwise, what we've seen, especially recently, is more around politics rather than addressing the real needs of the people.
Honorable?
Well, yes, that's the situation. That's the question. It's a good question that you ask. Is it now that they've started collecting money from the people? In fact, the principle of democracy is that no taxation without representation. The tax that you are collecting from me is not meant for your pocket. It's meant for you to be managed and then improve on my conditions, improve on my welfare. This is all about politics and representation. But here, the tendency was that they only hold government accountable and not the local government authorities, who are equally collecting tax from the people, which they should manage, and then ensure that the welfare of the people, those that they represent, that is promoted. But this has not been the case. The law has always been there for the National Assembly to perform oversight on local government. It was not being done because, as you know, the big parliaments that we had before. But this, I think that this parliament also needs to be commended for trying to flex. It has not reached that zenith of representation as we envisage, but at least it has experienced a leap. You can see that there is real representation now. We are holding the institutions accountable, as provided for by our constitution. And in fact, that's what the executive has also been in fact, it's an excuse that that it has been helping them. They will say, in the Local Government Act, a given percentage has to be, the 60% of the revenue of council development budget must go
into development.
To development of their areas or whatever you call it. And government also needs to contribute towards that. But the government is saying that is contingent on them providing the 6%, and they have not been providing it, so government also cannot provide it. So this has been the excuse of government, and of course, to some extent, they are right. I'm supposed to be contributing towards your work, but this is this work, and you are not doing that work, so how can I contribute? So now the National Assembly must ensure that 60% of the resources generated by councils go back to the communities, and government also, the contribution of government, that 25% contribution must also go to the councils. So this is the responsibility of both the executive and the legislature to ensure that this happens. So councils, as he said, have long been absent in the development of communities. Even you can see cleansing of the environment has been the challenge throughout the country. Garbage is thrown everywhere. In fact, gutters have been transformed into garbage dumps. That's the challenge with Banjul. The flooding in Banjul, my constituency, has been suffering the most in terms of flooding because of the clogged gutters, the clogged drains. People have transformed the drains into garbage dumps because there is no regular collection of garbage by the council.
Yeah, and because of lack of understanding, people think all this thing is central government. You got a community, even a community market, they say central government.
In fact, initially, when we came, this is what I was telling. In fact, it was even difficult for me to explain to my constituents. They were talking about Setetal. Can we come and then we organize Setetal? I said, this is not our responsibility. In fact, for the first one I attempted, I provided resources. But I told them that this is not our responsibility. I'm just doing this because we are coming new. But this is the responsibility of councils. We are not supposed to be engaging in Setetal. No community members should do that. It's the council. They are collecting resources. And government, councils itself should be thinking outside of the box to identify areas of generating resources. More resources, not only relying on taxes, the compound rates, markets. There are so many things that they can do to be generating income to promote the development of their communities. But they are not thinking outside of the box. You know, as he said, it's only politicking. It stops there. In fact, if you go to councils, they transform into political parties. Headquarters of the ruling party has been the case in the Gambia since the PPP era, APRC. You know, so that's it. And they're forgetting that representation. Once you are elected, you are no longer a partisan. Once you are given the mandate, you are no longer partisan. The president, the National Assembly members, the mayors, the chairpersons of area councils, the councillors, you are no longer partisan. There shouldn't be any partisan activity within the areas that we operate, the parliament, the state house, the councils, because we are national representatives.
Interesting. Let's now move forward.
Representatives.
Exactly. Let's now move forward, Seth Mati. Let's now look at the National Assembly and international agreements. We understand any agreement that the government has to sign with another state should be approved by the National Assembly. And just recently, we've seen the Minister of Interior, Yankuba Sonko, was at the Parliament where he told the lawmakers that the government has signed what he called good practice document with the European Union in 2017 to repatriate Gambians who failed in their asylum application. I just want to know, I mean, was this agreement approved by the National Assembly before it was signed?
Well, according to the Constitution, it's the President who is given that power to sign agreements. They are the ones who enter into agreements in terms of loans, in terms of grants, in terms of protocols, in terms of treaties. That is the province of the executive. But this cannot take effect without National Assembly ratifying them. So any agreement that is not ratified by the National Assembly does not hold water, does not have the effect of law. So it must come to the National Assembly. International agreements, it must come to the National Assembly for it to have the effect of law, because there are obligations on state parties, and those obligations have to, you know, find its residue in the National Assembly. That is the lawmakers. They must stamp their foot of approval, or what you call it, whatever you call it. There must be stamp of approval of the National Assembly, and that's the ratification of the National Assembly. So I don't know what you.
So where does this leave the National Assembly in terms of overseeing what the executive does? I'm sure this is not the first time. At some point, we had a similar incident regarding the fishing agreement between the Gambia and Senegal, which was signed without the approval of the National Assembly. Are you in any way worried that such can happen?
As I said, anything that is supposed to come to the National Assembly for ratification and it does not come, does not have the effect of law, cannot be considered as something in place. As simple as that.
So is this something that should have come to the National Assembly?
Well, and not everything also comes to the National Assembly. There are other things that, they're done at that level, bilateral. But things that have a bearing on our sovereignty must come before the National Assembly. Because the reason is that, according to the Constitution, we must not do anything that derogates on our sovereignty. The National Assembly or the Gambia must not enter into any agreement that will compromise, that will compromise our sovereignty, unless we take it to the people of the Gambia that we want to enter into this agreement. But it is minimizing our sovereignty, it is reducing our sovereignty. Do you agree? If the people through a referendum, if the people pass it, then that's fine. But no authority has that power to do that other than the people of the Gambia. They are the supreme authority.
Is there an agreement that the government has signed that should have come to the National Assembly and wasn't brought to the Parliament?
Well,
you're talking about this fishing agreement. There was an issue around it. It came to the National Assembly. The minister told us that it was an agreement that was contracted by the previous government. Well, we have seen documents that it was contracted by when they came into power in 2017, which he signed before the National Assembly was constituted. In fact, before this fifth legislature was constituted, I've seen a document, the fishing agreement.
Aside from the fishing agreement, is there any other agreement?
No, unless
you are aware of that should have been brought to the National Assembly?
No, I'm not, there's nothing that I'm aware of, unless it is brought to my attention.
Are you disappointed in any way? Hearing the Minister of Interior confirming that they have signed this agreement with the European Union in 2017. But again, in October last year, the government, in a statement issued by the government spokesperson Ibrahim Sankare, denied the Gambia government signing any sort of agreement with anybody.
Sometimes.
Quite contradictory.
Yeah. They confuse us. Yeah. That's how I get to understand the issue, because I think we need to give context, because when the new government was coming in 2017, they had a lot of issues happening, and sometimes I feel like they were signing deals that they were not. That they were not really studying to understand the context and even how people were going to react. And I was following the discussions, and the minister was saying initially when they signed the agreement, the EU was just sending, for instance, the migration agreement, that the EU was just sending few people, but then after a lot of people started coming, and then people started reacting. Because sometimes these are the issues that you need to look at. And of course, there have been several bilateral agreements that you hear, particularly with Senegal, when it comes to even the issue of defense. Today, we are not even sure, economic or no economic, the forces that are stationed in Fonyi. Because for me, how I see it is that there's some sort of lack of transparency in the kind of deals that our government is making, and and sometimes this is the difficulty, and this is the difficulty when people are just sitting somewhere and just confused about certain issues. And one thing that government need to always understand, that they are making deal on behalf of people. They are not making deals for people. When they make the deals for the people, they also need to consider exactly what benefits the people. But if they're doing it on behalf of the people, then therefore they need to take along exactly what the people want. But of course, there have been several deals that you hear, but I hardly heard even it discussed at the National Assembly. But of course, recently I've also seen that the MCC grant, there was discussion around that at the National Assembly, which those issues are kind of critical.
Honorable, this current legislature is about to phase out, and then we're going to election in April. But looking at the legislation that are still pending at the Parliament, what are some of these legislation that you think this current legislature should be able to pass before the end of their term?
Well, thank you very much. Parliament is continuity. Legislatures come and go, but the Parliament stays, because you will always have a new Parliament constituted. This outgoing one, is the fifth legislature. Will be ushering the sixth legislature in April after the elections. And that, of course, as you rightly said, there are lots of bills that are pending that have been, in fact, even dispensed with by the committees. It's just a question.
A lot have been passed as well.
Yes, certainly, yes. A lot have been passed.
A lot of bills.
Have been passed.
You have a long list, huh?
Access to information bill and all those things.
Yes. That's why I said this National Assembly, this fifth legislature needs to be credited. They need to be commended. They have raised the bar. At least, So there are lots of bills that are pending, but as we said, lots have been dispensed with. They have now become law, acts of parliament. And then, but as I said, there are some bills that are pending that have even been dealt with by the committees. It's just a question of reporting, following the stages, first reading, second reading, third reading of the National Assembly, for it to be given to the President to assent to, for it to be gazetted and become an act of parliament, that is law in our statutes. Yes, but we can, in fact, reports as well. There are reports that are pending. The committee that I chair have, I think, 2 reports that we have. We are ready, but we cannot lay because of the time. In fact, we are currently in session. It was loaded, but now we've reduced it because I think the ABC, the committee that assigns this work to the plenary, decided that we are too overloaded and time would not permit us. So we can, and as I said, it does not end with us. It does not end with this 5th legislature. Life will continue, so it can always be handed over. So in our handing over notes, these are the things that the 6th legislature is going to inherit. Some of these reports have already, been completed. It's just a question of laying them, and then the others are now laws. Others are now at they're just beginning. They can take up and then start. The one thing that is certain, and that one can really envy the 6th legislature, the coming legislature, is that this assembly has started establishing the standards. So it's going to be very easy for the 6th legislature. If you have competent, committed National Assembly members, they're going to find it very easy, because we have created the path. This 5th legislature has really created the path for them to navigate. Although not easily, because it has to have some storms or bombs, but at least clear. We already set the standards. The bar is raised.
Are you going to recontest?
Certainly, I'm going to. I've offered my election bid.
Certainly, what do you look for in the next legislature?
Well, I think people that serve the country. For me, that's what I always look for. People that are there to serve the country, and I would entirely agree that. Of course, my rating for the National Assembly is 60 out of 100 because I'm still mad at the failed constitution. I keep repeating that everywhere. But honestly, I think whether it is the bill that changed, the section 92, I think 92D, and also talking about the improving the standing orders, and then even the National Assembly Authority, which gives wider power to the National Assembly to be able to do certain things, and of course the number of bills and the reports that have that they are also with the National Assembly Authority is also sharing with the public with the Hansard. For the first time, I can download the Hansard. I think there have been significant improvement, and we are hoping that the new ones that are coming and those that are continuing will ensure that we get a constitution that is fulfilling and meant for the country to progress.
Is it ideal to have all the current members go and having new ones?
It's the state to
The likes of Honorable wants to come back.
Well, of course, he has been very effective
in Parliament,
in Parliament and during the debate. But of course, it's not us to decide that.
the people of Banjul have to decide that. But so we need people that understand their function, that it is about lawmaking, that is provided oversight, that is like being responsible to a large extent about the budget of this country, and those are people that also see the nation, rather than some parochial interest. And I think this is what we expecting, and parliamentarians should be there and should be treated. For me, if Parliament works, everything else will follow. For me, that's what I believe in. It's important. Thank you very much, Mati Jau, political analyst who also doubles as the executive director of the Center for Research and Policy Development. Thank you so much for coming on the State of Affairs program this week. Honorable Usman Sila, National Assembly member for Banjul North, who also doubles as the chairperson of the Select Committee. Thank you so much for coming on the State of Affairs program.
Thank you.
Well, viewers, with that, we come to the end of this edition of your weekly State of Affairs program here on QTV. I am your host, Aliou Cisse. And like we have discussed, all that we have said here is just about the interest of this country. We all want to see the country developed, and then where every Gambian will feel happy in this country. And it is important that all those who are serving in different sectors, even in the government, the ministers, permanent secretaries, you should always avail yourself to clarify certain issues, because it is important. We don't expect the president to be out every day, making statements. It is your responsibility as ministers or permanent secretaries or whatever role you hold in the government to come around and try to clarify certain issues. And we hope to have all the ministers who will come on this platform to discuss about issues of national development. On behalf of the production team, thank you so much for watching. Do join us next week. Bye-bye.